Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Chernobyl, and today I have another Genshin Impact video for you. I asked a randomizer to assign me teams for floor 12, and for topside I got Noelle, Albedo, Bennett, and Eula. After waiting a bit for Albedo's Husk of Opulent Dreams to reach full stacks, I begin by putting down a flower, then jumping straight into Eula's burst. You might notice something interesting about my Eula's build. She's using the Redhorn Thresher. But wait a minute, isn't Redhorn Thresher Noelle's best in slot weapon? What is it doing in Eula's hands? Well, on most teams that might be true, but on this randomized team, Noelle absolutely needs the Favonius Greatsword to maintain burst uptime. She will be on field doing damage for the most part. In contrast, Eula is just going to take the field twice, once at the beginning and once at the end, and the goal with Eula is just to crit fish. So I'm assuming that she's going to crit both times, which means that the Redhorn Thresher with its crit damage substat is ideal. On this team, Eula doesn't have a crowd battery or access to superconduct, and the PMA has a whopping 70% physical resistance, so it's just not worth it trying to involve Eula more than that. On the other hand, Albedo and Noelle have magnificent synergy together, and Bennett and Noelle have pretty decent synergy. Noelle can snapshot Bennett's attack buff, although his attack buff won't benefit her as much as it benefits some other DPS characters, because she already gets a huge attack buff from C6. My Bennett is also C6, which means that he will convert Eula's normal attack damage to Pyro, thereby reducing her total damage output. However, his C6 does not interfere with Noelle's damage. In its weakened state, the PMA only has 20% physical resist, so all Eula needs to do now is to crit. And fortunately, she does crit for 318k. On bottom side, I got Zhongli, Mona, Ayaka, and Rosaria as my randomized team. A very suitable freeze team for 12-1 and 12-2. I start by baiting the 3 Rift Hounds to jump onto me so that they are grouped, and then I freeze them, and manage to land a very clean Ayaka burst. Thanks to 4-piece Blizzard Strayer, Ayaka gets an additional 40% crit rate against frozen enemies. I then use Geodaddy's long legs to hurry over to the new wave of enemies, and bonk the Sametrill using a giant meteor to take care of it. Now, with some help from Rosaria and her Favonius Lance, I will focus on getting Ayaka's burst back up again. In this challenge, 12-1 was the hardest chamber. With her next burst, Ayaka needs to put the Pyrolector into his shielded state, and preferably take care of the Pyro Abyss Mage for the sake of time. With about 30 seconds left on the clock, the Pyrolector transforms. And now I switch to Mona, and repeatedly apply Hydro to its shield, like my life depends on it. Although the Pyrolector's shield only requires 36 units of Hydro to break, standard Catalyst ICD is not going to make things easy for me. I try to intersperse some of Mona's dashes, because her alternate sprint also applies Hydro. Rosaria's Q also contributes a little bit. But yeah, imagine how easy this would be with Xingqiu. I finished at 659, but the game still thinks I got 3 stars anyways. I picked the burst damage 20% card on 12-2, which is not great. It does significantly help Eula and Ayaka since they are very burst reliant. However, it does not help Noelle since she still does normal attack damage during her burst. Sadly, Eula has almost no energy because she did use her burst at the end of the PMA fight. And as part of the challenge, I want to get 9 stars in a single run if possible. So for most of this fight, Eula will just be sitting back and absorbing energy, getting ready for one crit fish at the end. That leaves Noelle and Albedo to do most of the work. And unfortunately, as its name suggests, the Primo Geo Bishop has a 50% resistance to Geo. That becomes 30% resistance after Geo Resonance, so it's not as bad, but still uncomfortable. However, I do have easy access to shields on this team, and here I use the Crystallized Shield to reflect the Primordial Shower back to the Primo Geo Bishop and deal a substantial chunk of damage. I am going to need to reflect the Primordial Shower twice, because single target damage isn't really this team's forte, and occasionally I'm switching in Eula and using her E to generate some more cryo particles. I'm also careful about placing Albedo's flower outside the boss's collision radius so that it does not get squashed. Here comes a second Primordial Shower. This time I do have Noelle's shield ready, but I also have a Crystallized Shield as a backup. At this point, the Primo Geo Bishop is almost dead, and what I should be doing is I should be funneling these Favonius particles to Eula for one final burst. But instead, I cashed in with Noelle and used Noelle's burst, which is a blunder. Not only is this a bad setup for 12-3, it's also overkill. Here I use Bennett's Burst and then Eula's Burst, and her initial hit does 56k melt, her E does 45k melt, and then her final explosion does a whopping 293k. Way overkill. My team on 12-2 bottom is facing 2 Abyss Heralds, and the key for this fight will be efficient grouping. I begin the fight by applying Jolie's shield, then dropping a meteor. I make sure to place a pillar behind me so it's less likely to interfere with my reactions. Winseth's RNG hates me and gives me the useless EM buff. After collecting a few more particles, Ayaka's Sakura Swirl is ready. Fortunately, I get a very nice grouping on these 2 heralds, and Ayaka's burst causes one of them to enter his shield phase, and brings the other one very close to the shield phase as well. Just a couple more charge attacks will do it. Here, I take a hit on Zhongli, but it's okay. Zhongli has a lot of HP to work with, and it's not going to matter in 12-3. While the 2 heralds are grouped, I should be using Rosaria's burst, but I hesitate, and hesitation is defeat, or at least it brings me closer to defeat. Later, when I do think of using Rosaria's burst, it is too late. They're already ungrouped, and I only freeze a single herald. I then make another mistake of focusing the herald with less HP when I should be focusing the one with more HP. As a result, even after Ayaka's burst is over, this herald still has about 40% of his shield left. But that's alright. Ayaka can keep him nearly permafrozen with her dashes and normal attacks. And it's helpful to get some energy back on Ayaka as well, in preparation for Magu Kenki in 12-3. And there we go, that's 3 stars. Wow, all 3 of these cards are useless. Anyways, I'm going to be facing 2 Rune Guards followed by 2 Rune Graders on 12-3 top. Unfortunately, as you might recall, I used Noelle's burst needlessly at the end of the fight against the Primordial Vishap, so I'm going to be spending the first 20 seconds of this fight doing nothing except generate energy particles for everyone. That includes using Eula's elemental skill, and that will be the extent of Eula's contribution in this fight. These enemies have 70% physical resist, so trying to set up Eula's burst is just not worth it. And here I use Albedo's burst. Now, usually in a mono Geo team, it's not worth using Albedo's burst because his burst doesn't scale off defense and it's just a DPS loss. But since I'm pairing him with Bennett here, he actually does have sufficient attack to make it a DPS gain inside Bennett's burst. That's a fact I wish I had realized sooner on 12-1 or on 12-2. Here I make a mistake and accidentally use Noelle's burst before using Bennett's burst, so she does not snapshot Bennett's attack bar. With the Rune Graders, I get some bad RNG. I try to run behind one of them and bait the other one to come over, but it doesn't use the charging attack right away, which costs me about 10 seconds. On the right side, you can really see Favonius Greatsword paying dividends on Noelle, as it generates energy for the entire team. As I do my best to focus on this Rune Grader that has more HP, I get squashed against the wall, and that causes the game camera to completely freak out, and as a result I have no idea what is happening right now. But that's okay. I can stay calm because, although Noelle may not have the most stellar damage output as a main DPS, she is basically unkillable. And one final Albedo burst. Overall, not the smoothest run. With better luck, this team can actually do 840, maybe even 845. Fighting Magu Kenki in the final chamber with a freeze team is not the best experience. Because he cannot be frozen, I'm only getting 20% crit rate from the Blizzard Strayer Fortress effect, as opposed to the usual 40%. I give Ayaka some energy to ensure that she can cast her burst after Mona's burst. Note that even though I have the protection from Zhongli's shield, I'm still dashing to dodge attacks whenever I can, and I think this is a good habit to practice because it ensures better shield uptime, which comes with Red Shred. Speaking of Zhongli, I'm running the catch on him, which is not a very standard option. Usually people will run Favonius Lance, but I had that on Rosaria already, so I figured, let's maximize meteor damage. Here I make a mistake of casting Rosaria's burst without realizing that Ayaka is a little bit short on energy. I also cast Ayaka's elemental skill too late and miss. As such, Ayaka's next elemental burst is not going to capitalize on Rosaria's crit rate buff. That's going to be a damage loss. You can see that some of her ticks are doing 6.2k, which is the non-crit. With about 20 seconds left on the clock, I know that I will only get one more Ayaka burst in this whole fight, so it's going to be very close. Fortunately, I do manage to stack every buff onto this final Ayaka burst. I get Rosaria's crit rate buff, Zhongli's Noblesse buff and Rest Shred, as well as Mona's Omen. Mona crits for 93k, and Ayaka's burst brings him to death's door. Narrowly, with a couple more charge attacks from Ayaka, I managed to secure 3 stars. Thank you for watching my Randomized Abyss playthrough. From my builds, you can see that Noelle, the MVP, was clearly deserving of the crown on her normal attack. One of my favorite things about this run is how it showcases the power of Favonius Greatsword over supposedly stronger options like Redhorn Thresher in energy-scarce scenarios. Also worth pointing out that even though I narrowly cleared all 3 chambers, it might give the wrong impression that all 3 chambers are about the same difficulty. The truth is 12-1 was much harder than the other 2. After getting a miraculous 95 seconds against PMA, I was pretty confident that the bottleneck was over. For reference, without randomizing teams, Rational can destroy PMA in about 50 seconds. That's it, Chernobyl signing out.